What happens when royalty meets late night television and the cameras capture every single second of a meltdown that nobody saw coming? In just 33 seconds, one comment would turn a friendly interview into the most shocking exit in talk show history. Seth Meyers sat behind his desk that evening, smiling at his guest with the kind of warmth he shows everyone who sits in that chair. The audience was buzzing with excitement. Meghan Markle had just walked out to huge applause, waving and smiling like she owned the room. She settled into her seat, crossing her legs and adjusting her dress with the confidence of someone who expected nothing but softball questions and praise. "Welcome to the show," Seth said, his voice friendly and genuine. "It's great to have you here." "Oh, it's wonderful to be here," Meghan replied, though her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. There was something in her tone, something that suggested she was doing Seth a favor just by showing up. Seth started easy, asking about her recent projects, her life, the usual warm-up questions that every guest gets. Meghan answered each one with lengthy responses, going off on tangents about herself, her accomplishments, her vision for the world. Seth nodded along, trying to find moments to interject, to keep the conversation moving, but Meghan barely paused for breath. "So, I've been working on this initiative," Meghan continued, not waiting for Seth to ask another question. "And honestly, it's something that I feel like nobody else could really do. It takes a certain level of, awareness and intelligence to really understand the complexities of what I'm trying to achieve." Seth's smile flickered for just a moment. The audience shifted in their seats. This wasn't the usual flow of a late-night interview. Guests were supposed to be charming, self-deprecating, funny. This was something else entirely. "That sounds really interesting," Seth said, trying to steer things back. "I think a lot of people are curious about how you balance everything. It must be challenging." "Challenging?" Meghan laughed, but it wasn't a warm laugh. It was the kind of laugh that made it clear she thought the question was beneath her. "Seth, I don't think you understand what challenging really means. Hosting a comedy show where you read jokes off a teleprompter is not the same as the kind of work I do. The kind of impact I make requires real sacrifice, real intelligence." The audience went quiet. Completely quiet. You could hear people breathing. Seth's eyebrows went up slightly, and he glanced at his producer off camera. This was live television. There was nowhere to hide, no commercial break to cut to, no edit button to make this go away. "Well," Seth said, keeping his voice calm and professional, "I think a lot of people work very hard at what they do, whether that's entertainment or activism or any other field. Everyone has their own challenges." "Sure," Meghan said, waving, her hand dismissively. "But let's be honest, Seth. What you do is make people laugh for 11 minutes before they go to bed. What I do changes lives. There's a difference. A big difference." The audience gasped. Actually gasped out loud. Some people looked at each other in disbelief. Seth's band members exchanged glances. This was unprecedented. Guests don't insult the host. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. Seth took a breath. He's a professional. He's handled difficult interviews before. He's dealt with awkward moments, with guests who go off script, with unexpected situations. But this was different. This wasn't just awkward. This was hostile. "I appreciate that you're passionate about your work," Seth said carefully. "And I think that's great. But I also think that entertainment has value too. People need laughter. They need a break from the difficult things in the world. That's not nothing." "Isn't it, though?" Meghan shot back immediately. "I mean, really think about it. You tell jokes about politics, about celebrities, about whatever trending topic your writers found on Twitter that day. Meanwhile, I'm actually out there in the world, actually doing things that matter. Your show is just noise, Seth. It's filler. It's what people watch when they can't fall asleep." The temperature in the studio dropped about 20 degrees. Seth's smile was completely gone now. His jaw tightened. The audience was frozen, watching this train wreck unfold in real time. Some people had their hands over their mouths. Others were filming on their phones, already knowing this would be everywhere by morning. "You know what?" Seth said, his voice still measured, but with an edge to it now. "I've had a lot of guests on this show. Hundreds of them. Actors, musicians, authors, activists, politicians, and every single one of them has shown respect for what we do here, even if they disagree with me politically or personally, because that's what professionals do. They show respect." "Respect has to be earned, Seth," Meghan said, leaning forward in her chair. "And I'm sorry, but I don't see what you've done to earn it. You make fun of people for a living. You mock and ridicule and tear others down for laughs. That's your job. That's what you do every single night. And now you want me to sit here and pretend like that's something worthy of respect?" Seth stared at her for a long moment. The silence stretched out, uncomfortable and heavy. Finally he spoke, and his voice was calm but firm. "I think we're done here," he said simply. "Excuse me?" Meghan said, her eyes widening in surprise. "I said we're done," Seth repeated. "This interview is over. I invited you here as a guest, to have a conversation, to let you talk about your work. But you've spent the last several minutes insulting me, insulting my staff, insulting what we do here. And I'm not going to sit here and let that continue." "You can't just end the interview," Meghan said, her voice rising. "I'm your guest. People tuned in to see me." "And now they've seen you," Seth said. "They've seen exactly who you are. Thank you for coming, but you need to leave now." Meghan's face flushed red. She looked around at the audience, as if expecting them to come to her defense, to tell Seth he was being unreasonable. But the audience just stared back at her, silent and shocked. Nobody was on her side. Nobody was going to save her from this moment. "This is unbelievable," Meghan said, standing up from her chair. "Do you have any idea who I am? Do you know what kind of platform I have? I could destroy this show with one social media post. I could ruin you." "Then I guess you'll do what you need to do," Seth said, standing up as well. "But right now, you need to leave my stage." "Your stage," Meghan repeated, laughing bitterly. "Your stage. You think you own this? You think you're important? You're nothing, Seth. You're a nobody who got lucky. Your ratings are terrible. Your jokes are stale. The only reason anyone still watches this show is because they're too lazy to change the channel." The audience had gone from shocked to angry now. People were booing, actually booing. Seth just stood there, arms crossed, waiting for her to finish her tantrum. "Are you done?" he asked, when she finally paused for breath. "No, I'm not done," Meghan snapped. "I came here thinking this would be a real conversation, thinking you'd actually ask me substantive questions about my work, about the things that matter. But instead, you asked me about my dress and my hobbies like I'm some vapid celebrity with nothing to say. You wasted my time, Seth. You wasted my time, and you insulted me by treating me like every other shallow guest who comes through here. I asked you the same questions I ask everyone," Seth said, his voice steady. "And somehow, every other guest manages to answer them without attacking me personally. Maybe the problem isn't the questions. Maybe the problem is you." That did it. Meghan's face went from red to purple. She grabbed her purse from beside the chair and slung it over her shoulder. "You're going to regret this," she said, pointing her finger at Seth like a weapon. "You have no idea what kind of mistake you just made. I have friends. I have connections. I have influence that you can't even imagine. By tomorrow morning, everyone will know what kind of person you really are." "I'm okay with that," Seth said simply, "because they'll also know what kind of person you are, and I think I'll come out just fine in that comparison." Meghan turned to leave, her heels clicking sharply against the floor, but she stopped at the edge of the stage and turned back around, unable to resist getting in one more dig. "You know what your problem is, Seth," she said. You're small. You think small. You dream small. You are small. You sit behind that desk every night, and you make your little jokes, and you think you're making a difference, but you're not. You're just filling airtime. You're just white noise. In 10 years, nobody will remember you, or this show, or anything you've ever done. But they'll remember me. They'll remember my work, my impact, my legacy. And you'll just be a footnote, if that. Seth waited for her to finish. Then he said, very calmly, very clearly, "Security, please escort Ms. Markle out of the building." 2 security guards appeared from the wings. They didn't grab her or touch her, but their presence made it clear that this wasn't optional anymore. Meghan looked at them, then back at Seth, then out at the audience that was still booing her. "This is ridiculous," she said to the security guards. "I'm leaving on my own. I don't need you to escort me anywhere." But the guards stayed with her anyway, following her as she stormed off the stage. The audience watched her go, the boos growing louder as she disappeared behind the curtain. For a moment, Seth just stood there, processing what had just happened. Then he turned back to his desk, sat down, and looked directly into the camera. "Well," he said, and despite everything, there was the hint of a smile on his face. "That was unexpected." The audience erupted in applause. Not polite applause, but real, thunderous applause. They were on their feet, cheering for Seth, supporting him, showing him that he had done the right thing. Seth held up his hands, trying to calm them down, but they kept clapping. Okay, he said finally, when the noise had died down enough for him to be heard. "So, we had a little more time planned for that segment, but it looks like we're going to need to fill some space now." The audience laughed, grateful for the tension break, grateful that Seth was handling this with humor and grace instead of anger or defensiveness. "Let me just say this," Seth continued, his tone becoming more serious. "I've been doing this job for a long time, and I've always believed that this desk, this stage, this show, it belongs to everyone. It belongs to the guests who come here to share their stories. It belongs to the audience who takes time out of their night to watch. It belongs to my incredible staff who work so hard to make this show happen. But it doesn't belong to anyone who thinks they can come here and disrespect all of that." More applause. Seth waited for it to quiet down. "I don't think I'm changing the world with this show," he said. "I've never thought that. But I do think that laughter matters. I think joy matters. I think giving people a reason to smile at the end of a long day matters. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of what we do here. And if that makes me small, then I guess I'm okay being small." The applause came back, even louder than before. Seth smiled, a real smile this time, and shook his head. "All right," he said. "We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we've actually got a great musical guest who I promise will not insult me for 11 minutes straight. We'll be right back." The show cut to commercial, and backstage, the entire crew was buzzing with what had just happened. Producers were on phones, publicists were being called. Social media was already exploding with clips and reactions and hot takes. But Seth just sat at his desk, took a sip of water, and prepared for the rest of his show. Because that's what professionals do. They handle the unexpected with grace. They stand up for themselves when necessary. They don't let anyone, no matter how famous or important they think they are, come into their house and disrespect them. When the show came back from commercial, Seth was his usual self. Funny, charming, quick with a joke. He didn't dwell on what had happened. He didn't spend the rest of the episode talking about it or defending himself. He just did his job. The same job he does every night. The same job he'll do tomorrow night and the night after that. Because at the end of the day, that's who Seth Meyers is. He's a professional. He's a host who treats his guests with respect and expects the same in return. He's someone who knows his worth and doesn't need validation from people who look down on him. And Meghan Markle? Well, she walked out of that studio convinced that she had been wronged, convinced that Seth was the problem, convinced that her behavior was justified. She got into her car, probably called her publicist, probably started planning her response, her statement, her version of events. But here's the thing about truth. It doesn't need spin. It doesn't need a publicist or a carefully worded statement. The cameras captured everything. The audience saw everything. And no amount of social media posts or friendly interviews or carefully crafted narratives could change what actually happened in that studio. Seth had given her every opportunity to have a normal, pleasant interview. He asked her about her work. He gave her a platform to share her message. He treated her the way he treats every guest, with warmth and respect and genuine interest. And she threw it all back in his face. She insulted him, insulted his work, insulted his staff, insulted the very concept of what he does for a living. She treated him like he was beneath her, like his show was beneath her, like everything about the experience was a waste of her precious time. The sad thing is, Meghan probably thought she was being powerful. She probably thought that putting Seth in his place, asserting her importance, demanding to be treated as special, would make her look strong and confident and uncompromising. But that's not how it came across. Not even a little bit. What the audience saw was someone who was deeply insecure, someone who needed to tear others down to feel important, someone who couldn't handle being treated like a normal guest on a talk show. They saw someone who thought that fame and status gave her the right to be cruel, someone who measured worth by platform size and social media followers instead of character or kindness or basic human decency. And they saw Seth, steady and calm and professional, refusing to engage with the hostility, refusing to sink to her level, simply setting a boundary and enforcing it when that boundary was crossed. That's the moment that will be remembered. Not Meghan's rant about her importance, or her threats about her connections, or her predictions about Seth's irrelevance. Those words will fade. They'll be forgotten in the noise of 1,000 other celebrity meltdowns and public feuds. But the image of Seth standing up from his desk, looking Meghan in the eye, and saying, "We're done here," with quiet authority, that will last. That moment of dignity in the face of disrespect, that refusal to be treated poorly in his own house, that's what people will remember. The audience that night went home and told their friends. They posted on social media. They shared the clips, and the response was overwhelmingly on Seth's side. People recognized what they had witnessed. They saw someone being bullied by someone who thought their status made them untouchable, and they saw that person stand up for themselves with class and professionalism. There's a lesson in that. A lesson about respect, about professionalism, about knowing your worth. Seth Meyers knows exactly who he is. He knows what he does, why he does it, and what value it brings to the world. He doesn't need Meghan Markle or anyone else to validate that for him. And when someone came into his space and tried to diminish him, tried to make him feel small, tried to convince him that his work didn't matter, he didn't argue with them. He didn't defend himself or explain or justify. He simply said, "No. No, you don't get to do that here. No, you don't get to treat me this way. No, this conversation is over." That's power. Real power. Not the kind that comes from titles or connections or social media followers, but the kind that comes from knowing who you are and refusing to let anyone make you question that. The contrast between Seth and Meghan in that moment couldn't have been starker. One person secure in themselves, comfortable with who they are, needing nothing from the other person except basic respect. The other person desperate to assert dominance, to prove importance, to convince everyone in the room and everyone watching at home that they matter. They're special. They're above all this. And in trying so hard to prove her superiority, Meghan proved the exact opposite. She showed everyone watching that underneath all the confidence and status and carefully curated image, there was someone deeply fragile. Someone who couldn't handle being asked normal questions. Someone who felt threatened by a late-night talk show host simply doing his job. That fragility, that insecurity, that need to lash out and tear down, it was all on display for millions of people to see. And no amount of backtracking or explaining or reframing could undo that. The mask had slipped, and what was underneath wasn't pretty. Seth, meanwhile, came out of the whole thing looking better than ever. He showed his audience, his staff, and everyone watching at home that he's exactly who he appears to be. A decent person doing a job he loves, treating people with respect, and expecting the same in return. When he doesn't get that respect, he doesn't throw a tantrum or make threats or stoop to insults. He simply ends the conversation and moves on. That's maturity. That's professionalism. That's what it looks like when someone has real confidence. The kind that doesn't need to announce itself or defend itself or prove itself. It just is. The whole confrontation lasted maybe 10 minutes from start to finish. 10 minutes that felt like an hour. That will be replayed and analyzed and discussed for much longer than that. 10 minutes that revealed more about both people involved than hours of normal interviews ever could. Because it's easy to be charming when everything is going your way. It's easy to be professional when everyone is treating you well. The real test of character comes in moments of conflict, in moments when someone challenges you or disrespects you or tries to diminish you. That's when you find out who someone really is. And that night, everyone found out exactly who Meghan Markle and Seth Meyers really are. One handled adversity with grace and strength. The other fell apart completely, lashing out like a child being told no for the first time. The irony is that Meghan probably walked into that studio thinking she was doing Seth a favor, thinking that her presence would boost his ratings, that her star power would elevate his show, that he should be grateful she deigned to appear at all. But she needed that platform more than Seth needed her. She needed the exposure, the opportunity to promote herself and her work and her brand. Seth's show would have been just fine without her. He has guests every night. Important people. Interesting people. People who manage to be engaging without being insulting. Meghan was replaceable. She just didn't realize it until she was being escorted out by security, listening to an audience boo her, watching her carefully planned publicity opportunity turn into a public relations disaster. And Seth? Seth went right back to work. Because that's what professionals do.